Hey everyone, and welcome back to Soul Refresh, your oasis where you get encouragement and inspiration for your leadership journey. Today, we're talking about something that's often overlooked, but is essential for thriving, and that is stewardship. Many people believe thriving starts when you have more money, more resources, more time, more fill in the blank. But in reality, thriving starts with what's in your hand right now. We often think we can't start to thrive and we can't have a thriving life until we reach a certain level or have certain things. But in God's kingdom, it's about stewarding what you already have and where you are. So, are you waiting for the perfect opportunity or are you using what you have? So, today we're going to talk about stewardship, and I'm excited because I'm going to be coming from one of my favorite parables. So the basis for our discussion today is one of my favorite parables. It's the parable of the talents, and it's found in Matthew 25 verses 14 to 30. So I'm actually going to read it from the New King James Version. I'm not going to assume that you automatically know what I'm talking about. So let's jump in. It's Matthew 25, verses 14 to 30. And again, I'll be reading from the New King James Version. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a man traveling to a far country, who called his own servants and delivered his goods to them. And to one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, and to another 1, to each according to his own ability. And immediately he went on a journey. Then he who received the 5 talents went and traded with them and made another 5 talents. And likewise, he who had received 2 gained 2 more also. But he who had received 1 went and dug in the ground and hid his Lord's money. After a long time, the Lord of those servants came back and settled accounts with them. So he who had received 5 talents came and brought 5 other talents, saying, Lord, you delivered to me 5 talents. Look, I have gained 5 more talents besides them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. He also who had received 2 talents came and said, Lord, you delivered to me 2 talents. Look, I have gained 2 more talents beside them. His Lord said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things. Enter into the joy of your Lord. Then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. But his Lord answered and said to him, You wicked and lazy servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed. So you ought to have deposited my money with the bankers, and at my coming I would have received back my own with interest. Therefore, take the talent from him and give it to him who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away. And cast the unprofitable servant into the outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So that is the parable. And when I say it's one of my favorite parables, it's because there's so many gems that can be gleaned from it. Each time I read it, I pick up just a little bit more. But just to summarize, there was a master traveling, and he entrusted 3 servants with different amounts of talents, money. So he gave one 5, one 2, and one 1. And 2 of them invested the money and multiplied their portion, but one, out of fear, hid it, and so when the ruler came back, he only had the one that he was given. And so the master rewards those who are faithful, and in the end calls the one who didn't do anything but hide the money, he called him unprofitable. So one of the key lessons or takeaways from today is stewardship isn't about how much you have, but it's about how you use what you have. So let's talk about stewardship. What is stewardship? I looked up the word just to give you the proper definition. And according to the Merriam Webster Dictionary, stewardship is the conducting, supervising, or managing of something. So it is essentially what you do with whatever has been entrusted to you, given to you, handed over to you. It's how you manage it, how you organize it, how conduct your business with it. So it's essentially doing well, or because you can have good stewardship, and you can have bad stewardship. So it's basically what you do, how you manage what you have. And we're all called to manage well. We're all called to be good, faithful stewards of everything that the Lord has entrusted to us. And when we're talking about managing, it is everything: your gifts, your time, your relationship, your opportunities, your home, your family, if you're as a leader, if you manage people, it's your team. If you're, let's say, the CEO of of an organization, it's the organization itself. So stewardship is a principle that can be applied across all areas of your life. And we can see stewardship principles throughout the Bible. Even from the very beginning, Genesis 1:28, the New King James Version says, then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So, from the beginning, when God created man, when he placed Adam and Eve in the garden, he gave them dominion. He expected them to be good stewards of, he wanted increase, he wanted them to be fruitful. I'll just read a couple more scriptures about general stewardship. So 1 Corinthians 4:2 says, moreover, it is required in stewards that one be found faithful. And that's the New King James Version. But I also like the New Living Translation that says, now a person who is put in charge as a manager must be faithful. So again, it's that word manage, how you manage something. And again, the word faithful. We're expected to be faithful with what we have been given. Another is Colossians 3, verses 23 to 24. And it says, and whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. So again, whatever we do, we want to do it as unto God, because he is our ultimate, what word do you want to, overseer. He's our ultimate manager. So even, in your work, or even whatever you do, ultimately you're working as unto God. And then the last one I'll read is 1 Peter 4:10, which says, as each one has received a gift, minister it to one another as good stewards of the manifold grace of God. So we're expected to steward our gifts well. And so I want you to think about, you know, when you think about stewardship and thriving, that thriving comes from being faithful with what you have. So it's not about how much you have. So the two profitable servants, they weren't praised because they started with more. It wasn't about necessarily the number that they were given, but it was because they did something with what they had. So you don't need more to thrive. You need to move in obedience with what's in your hand. So I want you to just think about, how do you apply this to real life? Leaders often feel like they need more time, they need more resources, or they need more skills before they can take action now. But stewardship is about using, again, what's in your hand now. How do you steward well what you have now before the increase comes? And as you practice and as you steward well the small things, you'll be prepared and better able to handle the larger things. So I've heard people say, "Oh, this is a small project, so they don't want to do the small project. They want to wait for the big project." Well, while you're waiting for the big project, you should steward the small project well. Do that small project with excellence. If you have one person on your team, manage as if you had 100 people on your team. So it's not despising the small number, but it's making do with what you have, being content with what you have, being obedient with what you have. And as the Lord honors your obedience, you will grow. And so the more will come. So as we just think about that concept of stewardship, one question I want you to think about is, what's one area of your life where you've been waiting instead of working? You could be waiting for more, waiting for the right time, waiting for help, wait, whatever you're waiting for. Think about that. What's one area of your life where you've been waiting instead of working? And ask the Lord to reveal it to you. You may already know. And if not, pray about it and ask God, is there an area of your life where you've been waiting instead of working? And see what he says. So that was I just wanted to generally talk about stewardship and what stewardship is. Now, I want to mention two things that as I read the parable, that spoke to me about what keeps us from being good stewards sometimes. I mean, there are many things, but I wanted to focus on these two in this episode because these are, in my mind, two of the main things that really keep us from stewarding well. And the first one is fear. Fear is rampant everywhere. And the servant who buried his talent did so out of fear. He said so in Matthew 25:25. He said, "And I was afraid and went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours." And so he was like, I was afraid. And so I was afraid of losing the one that you gave me. So I buried it. So here's that one. And that is so many people's realities. Fear keeps us stuck, whether it's fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of, not being perfect, whatever it is, that fear paralyzes us and keeps us from moving forward. And I just wanted to leave this truth here, which is found in 2 Timothy 1:7. That the word says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and a sound mind." Fear is not from God. I'm not talking about, that fear, there's a natural fear where, if you see like a snake or something, you have that little fear and which allows you to jump into fight or flight mode for safety. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that fear that grips us, mentally and emotionally. That fear of whatever it is, like I said, fear of failure. Sometimes it's fear of success. You think about what could happen, and just the magnitude of it all overwhelms you. And so you get paralyzed by fear. So, whatever that fear is, it is not of God. It's the word says, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear." That spirit is not of God. And He does not want fear to cause us to be stuck. He does not want fear to cause us to be disobedient to Him. And He does not want fear to hinder us from having that future and hope that He has for us. So we have to be able to move past that fear and just do what we can with what we have. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about in terms of what keeps us, another thing that can keep us from being a good steward is comparison. Comparison can be such a distraction from you accepting, believing, and carrying out your assignment, whatever it is. So the two profitable servants, the two faithful servants, they didn't compare the amounts that they had. One got five, one got two. But they each focused on their assignment. They each focused on um, what they were given. And if you look in the word, in verse 15, it says, "And to one he gave 5 talents, to another two, and to another one." This is key right here. "To each according to his own ability." And immediately he went on his journey. So each one was given what the man knew that they could handle. So it wasn't about comparing any of them to each other. They were being dealt with as individuals. So each of them received what according to what they could handle and according to their own ability. So the two that were profitable, they received what they had, they went and they did what they wanted to do. They weren't worried about, oh, I got more than him or he got more than me. Or it doesn't say that they worried about that. They just went and focused on their assignment. And so a lot of times when we compare our gifts, our resources, our journey to others, we risk resenting what we have. And instead of stewarding what we have, that resentment grows and we begin to despise, what we have. We may be like, oh, that person is further along. And so, instead of working and being faithful, your mind gets stuck in comparison. If you have a smaller team and your dream is to have a large team, instead of stewarding that small team, you're so consumed with, I don't want to only manage two people or three people. I want to have a big team of 10, 15, 20 people, whatever it is. But instead of, you're so consumed with more that you don't do well with what you already have. And in this age, we live in a society where now everything is in front of us. So everyone is posting everything that they're doing, everywhere they're going, what they're eating, what they're wearing. And so we're being bombarded with all of this stuff. And it really is easy to get caught up in comparison because it's just right in our faces. That's the truth. It's in our faces. And sometimes we don't think about what's really going on. We don't think that, that person has challenges or issues or things they don't like because we're seeing the highly edited versions of people's lives. We're seeing mostly, while there are some people who are very transparent and they share, the good, the bad, and the ugly, most people share the highlights, the high points of their lives. And so you're just seeing highlight, 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 highlight. And you're thinking, wow, what a wonderful life. This person was here this week. They traveled to another country the next week. They're somewhere else the next week. But you don't really know what's going on. But you are now beginning to compare where you are to what you're seeing, which is not, you're comparing apples to oranges. Like there's no need to compare yourself, your walk, your journey with someone else's, because guess what? That's their walk, that's their journey. The Lord knows what He's doing with them. So you just need to be worried about what He's doing with you and what He's asked you to do. So God, He didn't ask you to be faithful over someone else's talents, gifts, resources. He's just asked you to be faithful over yours. And so I just want to encourage someone as they listen to this, not to get caught up in comparison. Comparison is the enemy of contentment. You can be happy with what you have. You can be happy with where you are. And the moment you start thinking about what someone else has and how they're further along than you, have more than you, immediately all of the happiness that you had just kind of vaporizes and you forgot that 10 minutes ago you were happy with what you have. So if there's someone listening who is struggling with comparison, get in the word, begin to pray and ask God to help you to be able to overcome that, because that is something that can keep you stuck. That is something that can make you unhappy. That is something that can steal your joy. Just comparing your life to someone else's life, your where you are to where they are, what you have to what they have. And it may not be easy, but if you want to be able to move forward with peace and joy, that's definitely something that you'll have to be able to just get over, to be able to, and when I say get over, I don't mean it flippantly. I mean it's something you're going to have to work through to overcome that comparison trap, because really it is a trap. If you constantly look at what other people have, you will never be happy with what you have. So, shifting your mindset from, why don't I have more, or why don't I have this, to saying, how can I be faithful with what I have? How can I enjoy what I have? How can I love what I have even more? So I hope that is helpful to someone else. But again, the two things that I wanted to highlight from this parable, in terms of things that can hinder us from being good stewards, are fear and comparison. Those things are huge. So the next thing I wanted to talk about before I begin to wrap up this episode is essentially just talking about how growth comes through action. The two servants who invested, they saw increase, and that's because they did something with what they had. The one who stood still, who didn't do something but hide what they had, they lost everything. So imagine the Lord didn't say, "Well done, you hid it and you gave it back to me." He actually lost the one that he had. So I want you to think about this. Are you sitting on a gift, an idea, an opportunity, whatever it is, waiting for the perfect moment? Are you just sitting still and waiting, whether it's out of fear or comparison? Because growth isn't a given. You have to activate your growth with your obedience. And James 2:17 says, faith without works is dead. So a part of good stewardship, it's not just holding on to what you have. Um, you don't want to lose it, but a part of good stewardship is multiplying. It's increase, it's movement, it's going forward. So let's take this to leadership terms. Let's go back to the example of managing a team. If you manage a team, you want to there should be fruit from your team. And when I say that, I'm not necessarily saying you have to grow your team from 2 to 5 or 7 or 10 or whatever, but it's about the people too. So you want your projects to be done well, but you can grow your people. Are people growing under your leadership? Even if it's not necessarily a promotion, but are they growing professionally? Are they growing personally? Are your projects not only just being done, but are they being done with excellence? Are they being done ahead of time, ahead of schedule? So good stewardship, results of good stewardship is growth. It's fruit. You want to see some type of fruit. It's not just about stagnation and just keeping things the status quo. We're called to be profitable, and we're called to be fruitful. So Matthew 25:29, towards the end of the parable, it says, "For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have abundance. But from him who does not have, even what he has will be taken away." So faithfulness, our obedience is rewarded, with increase. So faithful stewardship leads to increase. And when you just don't move, or you neglect the things that you're supposed to be stewarding, it can lead to loss. And so as a leader, I want you to think about, how can you take bold, obedient action to create impact and growth? How can you steward well, that leads to impact and growth? As leaders, we want there to be impact. We want there to be growth, not just a hoarding of whatever we have. So, as I mentioned, I truly love this parable. And, each time I read it, I find another nugget. Even as I was reading it earlier during this episode, something else popped into my mind. And I'm just going to add it here before we wrap up. And when I read verse 24, which says, then he who had received the 1 talent came and said, Lord, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. And I was afraid, verse 25, I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Look, there you have what is yours. And I want to leave, the last point I want to leave on is, it's important for us to know God for ourselves. So he did an action based on what his misconception of God. So he was saying he knew the man to be a hard man, reaping where he did not sow, and so he acted upon that. But I think he misinterpreted um, what he thought about the man, and which caused him to fear. So it was one of those things where he could have looked at it like, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you have not sown and gathering. And because I knew you to be this way, I took a risk and did something with your money. So even if it, didn't work out, you could have said, because I knew you were this way and you probably would have wanted an increase, I took a risk. Even though I was not comfortable, I took a risk anyway and I did something with your money. And so he approached what he knew about the man, his master, with a lens of, again, fear. And so that's what caused him to be paralyzed. Instead of thinking through the lens of love, which he would have said, even if I did wrong, I took a risk and I lost the money, perhaps, he would be merciful towards me and gracious towards me, and it would be okay. And many of us approach God this way. We think, if I mess up, if I sin, God is going to strike me down, or, just some type of, we think of God as a harsh father instead of thinking of him as a good and loving father. And when we operate through the lens of him being a harsh father, we limit ourselves, we limit our growth, we limit, just our ability to express ourselves to him and have a relationship with him. And so I just wanted to really point that out, because sometimes the way we view God impacts how we steward what we have. So if we're not believing that God is for us, that God is, making a way for us, He is, all things are working out for our good, we will be fearful. We won't want to take a step because we'll believe that if we make a mistake, if we fail, if something messes up, then there's no redemption. It can't be restored, and that's just like your whole life's going to fall apart, which is not the case. When we view things from the lens of my father loves me, my heavenly father loves me, my heavenly father takes care of me, he's my provider, my provision, he gives me wisdom, then we're able to steward well, we're able to seek his guidance and his wisdom for stewardship, and the whole relationship becomes different. And we start from a place, a foundation of being able to want that fruit and that growth. So we're, instead of moving from fear, we're moving from a place of love. So I really wanted to point that out. As I was reading earlier, I mentioned, as I was reading at the top of the episode, that point really stood out to me, because it's important. If we don't have the correct perception of God, that really does impact who we are, who we understand ourselves to be, and what we think our purpose is and our role is. And of course, He is God, and we will never understand every single thing about Him. But there are some things we can know about Him. And as He reveals Himself to us, we want to make sure that we have a right understanding of who He is, and we're not accusing Him of being something that He is not. So I hope this episode was helpful for someone. I think stewardship is an important topic because we're all called to be good stewards. We're all called to steward something, and we're all stewarding many things. We're stewarding our health. We're stewarding our finances, our teams, our families, our children, if you have children, our relationships. We're stewarding so many things. And so good stewardship is a part of a thriving life, a thriving personal life, a thriving professional life. So as we wrap up, it's time for your Soul Refresh Challenge and Anchor. So this episode, I challenge you to identify one talent, as it's called in the parable, a talent. So it could be a gift, a resource, an opportunity, a skill that you've been afraid to use. So identify one talent that you've been afraid to use and ask God, what's my next step in stewarding this well? And I want you to really take some time to think about this. And based on what you hear, take one action this week, big or small. But the point is to just move on that thing. So, again, your Soul Refresh Challenge for this week is to identify one talent that you've been afraid to use and ask God, what's my next step in stewarding this well? So, again, it can be a gift, a resource, your health, your finances, a team, a relation, whatever it is. Ask God, what's my next step in stewarding this well? And take action this week. And then I'll leave you with your soul refresh anchor. And your anchor is a truth for you to hold on to as you move forward. So I want you to go back and reflect on the parable. So go back and read Matthew 25, and especially focus on verses 29 and 30. And I want you to journal what it means to be a profitable servant. So just think about that. What does it mean to be a profitable servant? So think about that, and just always remember that no matter how you're feeling, that thriving isn't about waiting for more or wanting more. It's about being faithful with what's in your hand and what do you have right now. I hope this episode has been helpful for you and that you enjoyed it. And if this episode spoke to you, please be sure to subscribe, share it with someone who needs encouragement, and also let me know your thoughts in the comments, or feel free to send me a message. I'd love to hear how this resonated with you. So until next time, stay refreshed, stay anchored, and keep showing up with intention. Take care.